Right, well, first of all, hello and welcome to the latest in the series of Isle of Claims home webinars. I'd like to welcome you all. Been an eventful week with the announcements of what we are going to be allowed to do in a few weeks. So, not sure of the impact that will have as an all yet. I think that impact on home claims probably started a couple of weeks ago. First of all, thanks to our corporate partners. As always, that's CoreLogic, Carpenters, iCab, Innovation Group, GeoBear. I'd like to say thanks for all of your support. But mostly I'd like to thank all of you for your support because this is now the 14th in this series of webinars. We've got some fantastic feedback both about the specialist and main issues that we've dealt with. Really encouraging stuff, and a lot of thanks for the issues that we're addressing. We appreciate that, and we will be publicising more about some of the stuff we're going to keep going during the summer, which will be good. I think it's important for us all to continue the discussions. We've seen some great discussions and communication over the last few weeks between insurers and suppliers, so I think it's really improved, and I think I'm very committed to ensuring that continues as we continue the journey out of lockdown. So if you've got ideas or anything in that, please just drop me a note at alan@isleofclaims.com, and I'll give you more in the future next week. But this week, we're back to suppliers and building claims and returning to work. And we're going to take a look at data. So the theme is building claims data. And this week, it's with the infinite amount of data that now we're able to get, what's the impact on things like service and cost, on customers and planning? Really important, isn't it? I think, as I said earlier to the participants, it's a bit like the good, the bad and the ugly, isn't it? And it may be reminiscent to management information to an extent. The good is that, used properly, this should be able to help us in all aspects of a claim, from the customer all the way to the service, planning process, suppliers. The bad might be that we pick up and look at the wrong areas. And the ugly is volume. And that is the fact, will we be able to see the wood for the trees as we start to get data? How do we get through that? And I think the secret probably that I would hope to discover today is that it's more than anything else, it's going to be about being clever and trying to keep things simple. So today I'm really pleased to have a good panel to discuss this today. Mike Hall, who you will have seen at our conference, is a long-time supporter of Isle of Claims. Mike's the Director of Property and Liability at LV. Welcome back to Laura Lazarus, who's a supply chain lead at Property and Special Lines at Aviva. And welcome to somebody else, apart from Laura, who'll be talking at our building conference, which is Tom Burrows, the Director of Technology at the Claims Consortium Group. Probably a quick plug for that and a few of our other events. Building Repair Conference on 29th of September at Coventry. We're looking forward to that. Just 2 weeks after that, we'll have our full traditional home conference, hopefully. Next week, we've got the Motor Claims Festival, which is going to be done virtually with several debates, etc. And if you look in the ILC website, you'll see a lot of that. And obviously a plug to our motor equivalent of today, which is the ARC 360 webinars, which are on a Wednesday at 1:30 with Mark, so we look forward to that. But back to Mike, Laura and Tom today. All their thoughts are their own, but hopefully what they'll do is, they will, I know them, they'll continue to make us think, make us learn, make us consider, and hopefully help us all improve. And that's what we're all here to do through the ILC platforms in whatever way we are holding them. So at the bottom of your screens, there'll be a chance to do a quick chat and questions. So let me start, I guess, with Laura. Over a year now into the transfer over from the other sides of business to Aviva, what do we currently use data for? And what do you think is missing?
We currently use data for lots of things, and I think maybe that's part of the kind of challenge with data. I'm not sure we're always as clear about what we're using it for, which might then help others provide us with the right data. We use it for, ultimately the outcome we're trying to achieve is to ensure that we're getting good customer and cost outcomes, right? So when we're asking suppliers for data, that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve. I guess the bit that's maybe a little bit more invisible to people is the kind of regulatory obligations that we have to in order to ensure that we're keeping the business and our customers and our pounds safe. and also the kind of feedback loop into pricing and underwriting in terms of claims trends, etc., that we see. So we use it for a multitude of things. I think the bit that's missing for me is almost the so what. Or the story. So, we get lots of data, and our suppliers are very good at providing us lots of data in a timely fashion. But it's almost the story. What does that data mean? What does it tell us? How does it evidence good customer outcomes? How does it tell us we're getting good value for our money? I think that's the bit that's missing for me at the moment, and the bit that we're really trying to focus on.
Okay. So that's a view from something fresh coming in. I think, great to talk about outcomes and cost. But we have been trying to do that for quite a while. Mike, you're experienced in this. What do you think is the data that we have, and what are we using for? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to pick up on Laura's point. I think, we are a regulated industry. That creates challenges. A lot of the time, even as a claims director, you have to prove that you're controlling the risks. It's very much a risk-focused company. Different insurance companies will have different risk profiles and appetites. And I mean, in an ideal world, you might be trusting of a supplier just to go out and do the work and just send an invoice. But unfortunately, we are in a kind of a regulated industry where we have to prove that we have some controls in place around cost control, and then obviously the customer as well. So there's lots of kind of SLAs around telephony and time to appointment, time for repair, and all those sorts of things. I think the main thing with a lot of the data that we have and the SLAs that we have that kind of then sit in front of that, you need to consider the full picture. It's not just about someone meeting those SLAs. You need to consider and dig a little bit deeper. I mean, a great example would be on telephony SLAs, for instance, and data on that. You might have an SLA in place that says that someone has to phone the customer or answer the customer's call within a certain amount of time, etc., etc. Well, a way to get around that is to have someone really inexperienced put on the phone. So, and I've been to places where that's how someone meets that SLA, for instance. And you listen to the call and the customer just gets frustrated. So it's not, really good to look at these things in isolation. And I think that's probably what's missing, in respect to a lot of data. It's actually just understanding what it's telling you. You've got to use data in a way that it's that makes you curious, rather than thinking, well, the average cost has gone up, therefore this supplier is not doing very well. Well, I mean, there could be thousands of reasons why the average cost has gone up. It could be that you've changed your processes and you're sending high value claims. It could be there's a different mix in the claims you're sending them. Obviously, different perils have different average costs. It could be there's inflation because of material costs going up or labour costs going up. It could be the supplier's doing a poor job. But it's all of those elements, and I think that's the one thing I think that's probably missing as a whole is that people don't necessarily dig down to the next level of the data and what it's actually telling them. Unfortunately, the challenge with that is that it then takes you a lot of work. I mean, Laura was talking just before we came on the webinar about the amount of data they've got and trying to find out what's relevant, what's not relevant. And I said, well, I'm not going to tell you what I do because it's taken me years to get to the point. I will share some of it, but it's taken years to get to the point of what are the relevant things you want to actually look at, and that's got to be the key focus. But it takes a lot of work. And 9 times out of 10, I'll have a bit of data telling me there's something to look at. I'll spend quite a long time looking into it and then work out there's nothing to worry about. But that's the reality of it.
So I guess it's two things there then, Mike, before I move on to Tom, is the data might tell you somewhere to go and look, but it doesn't make a judgment.
Yeah.
And two, a snapshot of data doesn't really tell you anything. Exactly. So Tom, where are you coming in from the supplier side, as well as invested money into technology and digital outcomes and collecting data? So where are we now? What kind of data can we collect? What are we using it for? And what do you think we should be doing next?
Yeah. So I think we're collecting an awful lot of data now. The number of sort of systems and, you know, our world and many other suppliers and so on will be capturing all manner of different data points throughout the journey. I think kind of the trick then is about building a culture that understands what your outcome actually is. So take the point about the telephony just now. Well, actually, what's the behaviour that we're trying to drive? What's the outcome that we're actually trying to get to? Does it actually matter if the call is answered in 20 seconds or 40 seconds? Because it's that little classic difference between management information and business intelligence, right? Where, you know, management information, vast numbers of rows and columns and so on that aren't always terribly helpful, but give you facts. Business intelligence being about telling you a story. So, you know, echo the points from earlier, it might be that we've got, you know, we read a stat out that maybe does or doesn't look terribly good. What perhaps the gap that we're trying to get into now and to build a culture around that is to say, okay, well, what was the story? How did we actually get to that point? And don't just be looking at that individual statistic about the phone stat, for example. Overlay that with other things that are going on in a much sort of broader sense. So, you know, take the point about the telephony again. If you were to look at the phone stat by itself, that might not be very helpful. But if you were to line that up alongside things about your customer feedback and your service and your turnaround time and so on, then okay, actually, maybe the phone stat did drop off a little bit, but that was done deliberately in order to cause a more positive effect somewhere else. And that was actually the behavior we're trying to get to. We didn't mind it took you longer to answer the phone. That's okay, because actually we got to the right place in the end. So, you know, I think it's about kind of understanding strategy, understanding what's important, finding the right measures that actually drive the right behaviors behind that, and then putting them together in a simple sort of way that paints that overall picture, because that will get you that sort of feeling of confidence that things are generally going in the right direction. And by looking at how things develop and change over a period of time, that can be more interesting and more insightful than just looking at that one individual snapshot.
Thanks. That's really interesting. It's a good high view. I will go to look at it in more detail and to some extent a more simple level later on, because we had our friend Sean from Daylon the other week talking about a more simple amount of data he had used just to direct a contractor back from lockdown and looking towards what they'd done in the floods and what things were like. So data can be interpreted all, but at that level it's maybe easier and more simple. What I'm kind of hearing now is there's a lot of good data coming out, but it's about the analysis, and I think that's what Tom's just said. It's about the analysis. But who would do the analysis? Because you can have data analysts, you can have all sorts of things, but this is quite a tough thing to understand, as Mike pointed out, when you dig into it. So Laura, why do you think it seems so difficult to get the sort of data that you think would allow you to make the right decisions or push in the right direction?
I think there's probably lots of reasons. I think the key reason, I think we've all got to be clear, and this is one of the challenges I found actually coming into the property space. I suppose in the motor and injury world, it's potentially easier to kind of know what good looks like, because there's a whole raft of data out there, and we've probably got more visibility of the market. In property, I just think it's really hard for us to know what a good customer outcome and good cost outcomes look like. So we know that there's a bunch of stuff we know, but it's almost the underlying stuff that we're really trying to get to. So I think we need to be really clear with our supplier partners. Actually, we all need to work together and say, right, what does good look like? And we need our suppliers to help challenge us on this and help us tell the story. So to the point around management information versus business intelligence, well, we're kind of asking, so we need the management information, and that helps us with some of our keeping the business safe and some of our regulatory obligations that Mike and I will both feel the pain on. But it's the business intelligence bit is the bit I think we need to kind of collaborate on and work on together to help us understand what the trends are, what's changing, how we can improve things for our customer, how we can drive better cost outcomes. I think it's got to be a collaborative approach. Some suppliers that you find are really, really good at kind of articulating the value and telling the story, and others aren't. And I wonder if that's because in some areas it's easier to do that because the desired outcome is perhaps clearer. So I think it's got to be a joint effort. And we need people to be challenging of us. If we're asking, if everyone has in mind what we're trying to achieve and what we need the data to tell us and how we want it to inform our wider business around pricing and underwriting trends, etc., then if we're clear on all of that, then it should start to make it easier for us to all work together on kind of building that storyboard over time.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I'm just going to go back to the beginning, because there's a meltdown probably about to take place between motor and home claims, because I don't know whether the meltdown is then going to say, yes, it is easier, or no, we're cleverer, Laura, whatever it is. However, there is one
definitely could be.
Well, there is one outcome I would like to point out too, and that is on our ARC 360, Wednesday motor one that Mark Hardaway does for us. They're able to give pretty up-to-date information out to all the suppliers that tune in on where the claims have come from, the areas of the country that are suffering the best, etc. And that's pretty instant stuff, which we, I know a lot of people are rightly saying it's more complex. It is more complex, but wouldn't it be great to get more up-to-date, relevant information? It wasn't complicated, but there you go. Mike, within that, so why do you think it's so difficult to get the right data?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that property is a lot more complex than motor. I'd just like to get on the record. I've been saying that for years to my motor colleagues, but I don't think they agree. I've previously done some work with the ABI quite some years ago on escape of water claims, and escape of water has been a challenge within the property world for years. And what we wanted to do, they commissioned a piece of work where we're trying to get a bit of analysis on actually what's causing the increase in frequency and the increase in average cost. And actually it proved to be incredibly difficult. One of the challenges is that basically there's no one person who has all that data. So if you've got a pipe that's burst, well, the customer could get their own plumber out. You could send a home emergency plumber out. You could send your own plumber out, etc., etc. So there was no reliable way of really collecting that information. It proved really difficult, and in the end, I don't think the report went very far. And even as much as I've been talking internally a couple of days ago about, when we point supplier on delegated authority, quite often we might not know the real cause of damage. You might know it's an escape of water. You won't know that it's caused by freeze, and you probably have more of an idea because obviously it's cold outside, for instance. But getting to that next level is then quite difficult because you'll then go out to a contractor, and the contractor is really there just to repair the water damage. They're not there to ascertain what's caused the leak. And that's one of the challenges, I think, in home. You could have 6-7 suppliers involved. I think I said this at a conference a couple of years ago, and to then get them all to provide data in the same way and to be at a point where you can rely on the data and it's accurate is a very big ask. And I think whilst we can work together better, and we can always work better together, there are some challenges that are going to make it very difficult to actually get to a point on some of these areas where you can absolutely rely on the data and then use it to enable you to change things. Obviously the ABI was doing it in a way to try and educate customers on how they might be able to reduce escape of waters in their home, because obviously no one wants an escape of water in the home, but we obviously want to use it to try and reduce costs, reduce frequency, and make, not make more money, but obviously then charge less premiums, etc., etc. So yeah.
I think we're going to start this. We're going to start a new movement called "We're Far More Complicated Than You Motor People Are." In case there's any motor people, it probably is, because no two kitchens are alike. But we'll probably have this debate and see if it rolls on to March. But it's very true. But as both were, well, certainly as Laura, and certainly in 360, in the ARC 360, Tom, it's been collecting data quickly from systems. And possibly from suppliers as well. I'm not as okay with it as I could be. So like a number of others, you're a supplier that has quite a wide range of work and has invested in systems and data. So even from the amount that you get, is there information that people like Claim Consortium have got that allows us to see trends and make a difference? Because as Laura said, sometimes that might be more easy to come from the supplier end than it is from a big to collect the data in the right way.
Yeah, quite possibly. And one of the things that we worked on quite a lot recently is about asking the right question at the right time. So being smart about, when you're talking to customers or maybe there's somebody in the property doing some work, not going into overkill and asking 963 questions on your first call, because that's not helping anyone. But being smart about that, asking the right question, and that has to come from understanding what's important. So again, it's all the way back down through that flow. So if we're working to an objective, we've got a strategy, what is it we're trying to achieve? Okay, so we've kind of got that. If we flowed that all the way down then, and we now know what measures, what are the important facts that success is going to hinge on, and we're asking those things in the right places, that's a really great start. Is it difficult to get data? Not really. Is it difficult to get the right data? That's probably the more challenging bit. But again, with that strategy in the right place, and with the people in your teams like me who do the technology stuff, who are close to the systems and are close to the data, if we all are on the same page and understand exactly where we're going, understand exactly what our strategy is, then some interesting things can happen, because you might find actually you've got a whole wealth of data somewhere that you didn't really know was that valuable to you until your data guy who owns that database over there that knows actually, do you know what, every time we do one of these we collect this piece of information, and if I pulled all of those things together, really going to help you answer that question up there. And maybe there are slightly different ways of looking at some of the challenges or problems that we deal with. So a little example of it will be something that we've done just recently about just trying to look at how often a claim gets picked up and put down and looked at during the course of its life cycle, and who's actually doing that. We do that for sort of audit and control purposes to understand who's going in and out and who's doing things. But actually, when you do that at the macro level and do a big sort of 18-month trend of that, you start to see some patterns going on in there. And you go, actually, right, well, this initiative over here where we wanted to try and empower people to do more stuff by themselves or whatever it might be, we need to just step right back a little bit rather than getting too close into the detail. Take a much broader step back and look at all of those bits of information you've got and start to plot them over a much bigger time scale. Then you can start to see some of the interesting points come out, and that's where it can make it a little bit easier to understand then, is your strategy working? Is it going in the right direction? Are you getting to the right kind of places? That's kind of what we've been doing.
I think that's first class. I think it's difficult. There is difficulty in the way that I think we've worked in the past in getting that done. Hopefully that will be more simple now. The whole industry seems to have moved closer together because of what's happened in the last 3 months. Let's hope it stays that way. So I'm going to go to Laura and then Mike next in the next one. So let's bring it down to a more practical level. Let's look at networks, for example. By the way, next week's webinar will be looking at contracted networks of all types, rather than sort of telling us all the same, take a look at the benefits of different ones and different ways of working. But if you look down, and both of Viva and LV have their own networks to some extent, where can you take data down that would help the performance or help your performance judgment of your network, both individually with contractors, but more the overall performance? So what's the kind of simple data that you feel you can't get a good enough hold of that would really help? I'll give you an example. I think it was Owen Pugh was on the other week and he was talking about if you have an additional works request halfway through, you can look at one of your network and say, well, actually, they've submitted so many requests. They've, 40 requests over the last year. 39 of them were okayed, so we actually don't need to look at all their requests. We should just automatically take them, as opposed to somebody who you might have questioned half of and do that. So that's an example. But other things within even at that small aspect, that better information can allow for a smoother process. Laura, you first, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. I think the more simple data and the more straightforward stuff, I think I'm going to sound like a broken record now, but I think we're getting the right data, and we are working closely with our network just now try and improve data, and we're sharing it a little bit better. So I think we get the right data. For me, the data isn't the point. I think there's a loop to go round to say, are we asking for too much data, or is the data we're asking for telling us a story? I keep going back to that same point. I think that's the bit that we need to work more closely together on, is to understand what it's telling us. So to your point, if we are seeing somebody, I don't know, a certain behaviour from a particular site, or putting in change requests or whatever, well, why is that? Is that because there's something wrong with how they're operating, or is it because I don't know, we've given them some really complicated play with from the start, was involved or whatever. So I think it all comes back to the storytelling and people being able to just articulate the value that they're bringing. And actually, if you had to explain concisely in a few sentences, or using a few graphs or a few images, how would you articulate what you're seeing in your part of our system, what costs doing, what life cycles doing, how quickly are you getting out to customers, how quickly are you repairing customers' properties? It's that bit that I just think we miss. I've got loads of that tells me that, but I don't know if it could be better, or whether there's a reason why it doesn't look as good as others. It's that remains the challenge in my mind.
Thanks, Laura. So does that mean, Mike, that we should be able to then use it more in a planning process? And we've looked there from how we can judge the network. And to some extent, that's not a lot different from the lessons we would hope to have learned through having far too much management information and trying to focus rightly. But would the right data help us plan when a surge comes? Because we've collected better data from the previous surge, and accepting that no two surges are the same place, same time, etc. But is the data that can say that we can mobilise? So our surge plan is now in place from data that we've actually taken from how we've reacted before and what's happened, because the data is better, rather than just having a surge plan which cynically might some say was just putting a bit of paper by all the suppliers to tick a box because it's a difficult thing to do. So yeah, the question is, do you think there is data there that will help us plan better to deal with surges and events?
Yes. Well, I think we've done a lot in that space already for surges, and certainly, we can plug certain events or expected events into our surge plan and look to see where the pinch points will be. So you can see that, this particular contractor, if you send too much down, this route, it'll fall down. You can look to kind of tweak it to see whether you can, desktop handle more, whether the adjusters are going to fall over and things like that. I think so. Just generally, I think because I think you kind of asked a couple of questions in there. I think the data's there. Apart from what I said about the escape of water and causes of escape of water, which is really challenging to get to the bottom of. I think when it comes to the planning and management of contractor networks and suppliers, I think we are in a really good place now. I think there's still further work to do. I think you and I were discussing, I think earlier in the week, Alan, about what we can do to probably help contractors a bit more. Do we make it a bit too complex for them on smaller value jobs? Can you use the data actually? I'm a big believer in using data to try and see where you can simplify processes rather than make them more complex. It probably, a lot of it comes from the systems thinking work we've done previously, where when you look into it, actually a lot of it is down to process and not the people within the system. It's the things you ask them to do that causes the challenges rather than the people sitting there. Most people want to come in and do a good job, and that includes suppliers and contractors. Having said that, you obviously still need to make sure you have the right controls in place and measures to spot where there are people not doing that. But I think, for LV, one of our core values is inspire trust. And by that, we trust our customers, trust our people, and we trust our suppliers. And I think when you come at everything from that point of view, you have a different discussion. I think Laura was saying it earlier, where, you start to kind of work with people to say, look, this is showing me this. What could be causing this? One of the areas where I think I've had quite a few conversations over the years with different suppliers, where one of the areas where they do struggle is that they have been, I always say to them, look, you tell me what we're doing wrong that's causing our customers and you and us pain. And they say, well, that's fine. But I've had conversations in the past, and one of them in particular, I won't say who, said, we had a tender process, and part of the tender process is almost asking, you tell us what we're doing wrong. And I think they then didn't get the job because they were too honest, and the feedback was, well, you were too honest, you told us too much about what we were doing wrong. So, that's one thing I think as an industry we can change, that trust and working together with suppliers and with contractors and partners, as we call them. So it's less about the data and more about, and I think, Tom, you were saying this just before we came on air as such, more about the cultural approach of how you actually deal with the data or how you actually work with people.
That's a huge point, Mike, and again, I'll repeat myself. Over the last 3 months, if there's one thing I would say about what's happened in the claims world over lockdown and COVID-19, certainly in home, is the ability for the insurers, at least the ones that I know participated here, to be reaching out and helping suppliers in whatever way they can through a very uncertain period, and that continues, and that's been really, really appreciated. So as I will say again later, we're really keen at ILC that we remain a platform in which this can increase and people can learn and work more collaboratively together. We're not trying to endanger any sorts of competitive elements here. This is just about the industry getting better. So, Tom, you guys do quite a lot of work in this. What the data you get with that can help the old industry, does it now go into an ability to do some little bits of forecasting which would help the planning stage? Because, again, the data can help us move forward apart from analyse what's happened. So what kind of forecasting can you see the industry being able to be provided with in the future?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's some sort of situational things that happen. So whether it be as a relation, off the back of a surge event or the current conditions we find ourselves in, there'll be some simple things like fluctuations in price of materials. Those are quite simple to track, and then if you're quick-footed about it, understanding a bit more detail about what's happening to a claim and why something is happening on it. So say, for example, right now, as we stand, customers may or may not feel able to let contractors come into their homes right now. So as long as you're understanding what's going on there and you're recording, and then, back to that point, the right question at the right time, we can start to build up quite a decent image of what that really looks like and, what percentage of claims are getting stuck for whatever reason. And then starting to overlay that with that forecasting model that says, okay, well, out of X many builders on the network here, there's a pattern with these three that when they get up to a certain amount, that's when things start to get difficult for them. That helps you with your forecasting. You can put that into your modelling around your geography and when things are going to happen in certain areas of the country and so on and so on. So it's I think all of the raw data is there to enable those kinds of things to happen. Certainly, I think it's the sort of thing that we're getting into. I'm sure all of the supply chain are as well. But again, there can be that sort of collaborative, aggregated view of things, which can be a little bit more difficult then. To say then, okay, well, we have a portion of it because there's a certain amount of claims that go on in the country that we deal with. Others in our sort of line of work will have a similar kind of thing. Is there a point at which some of that information can come together in the right way? There, lots of challenges around that, no doubt. But as a sort of as a movement, maybe that's something interesting to talk about. And again, when it comes back to things like processes, when the surge events happen, when the COVID events happen, hopefully never again, understanding a little bit about the value of process. We touched on that example earlier on about approvals for a change in cost or something. Well, 99 times out of 9 you approve it every single time, then what value are you adding? Probably not a lot. But actually, one of the other things I was going to mention is about there can be a tendency to look at data in a fairly sort of narrow vertical manner, where you pick one measure or one particular part of your business or your sort of book of claims and look at them very, very sort of in a very sort of narrow view, where I think when it comes to process, it's helpful to expand that view as much as you can, in order that you can say, okay, well, from a systems thinking point of view, it might feel right for us to put this step in here or do that approval over there. But actually, if you flip it the other way and look at it horizontally and go, okay, well, across the masses, you know, we've got 20,000 things or whatever that are happening in this process. What's the baseline? What's the standard? What's the average? Is it moving or is it staying stable? And actually, if it's staying stable, well, just look at the things where it's going a bit too far off track from there. It's back to that kind of cultural point of view, really, and sort of thinking, you know, using the massive data that we start to collect now to help us pick the right process and pick the right points at which to intervene. And when a claim arrives at the beginning of the journey, what's actually the right way to treat this? Our sort of process point of view might have said, well, you've dropped it into that bucket at the top, therefore the next thing we're going to do is this. Well, actually, is that always the right thing? Because, you know, if we've been asking the right questions along the way, we might straight away recognize, no, second floor cistern, this type of construction, this many people in the house, it's not going to work if you do it that way. You need to send this one over here instead. It's that kind of stuff that I think will start to come out. So
yeah.
That's what we see.
Well, let me just move that on a bit, because collecting the data has become, so I'm going to touch on Ian Hogarth, who has just asked a question which can cover us both this week and next week. But one of the things he's asking in there is, would it be easier, really, I'm interpreting, would it be easier really if we had one more common platform? There are several in the market. Can we have one common platform that we use for data? I don't know why that would be competitivity. It happens in some industries. Or do we just need a few good platforms that we can amalgamate the data together because the systems begin to talk to one another? Is one common platform for using building data realism, Laura?
I don't know. You know, there'd be some real benefit in that, I suppose. But I think we'd need to understand what data was going to be fed into it, how we would all agree on what we wanted to see from it, how we'd all make sure it's protected. You know, it is a competitive market. I'm sure there'd be lots of things we all wouldn't want to be shared. So I think as a something to kick around and explore, you know, it's probably a conversation to be had. I fear it would be really hard, and actually, you know, people would naturally be quite protective of what went in, and that would probably impact on the and you'd expect to deliver. Is my honest view. I think, Mike, I don't know if you've got a different view.
Alan asked the questions, not you, Laura. I'm joking, sorry. She's frozen there as well. Just it looks like she's staring at me. It's interesting again. So I kind of go back to some work we did with the ABI, and this is probably about 10, 12 years ago. We were trying to find a solution to the problem where you've got limited capacity within, at the time it was the loss adjuster market, to deal with massive surge events. And one of the options which was discussed, and this was 12 years ago, was whether you have a common platform, because otherwise it's going to be quite difficult for everyone to use a particular adjuster. You know, there's always the kind of, can you use this adjuster in this particular street, and they do all the claims in that street, for instance. Again, I think there's just some real challenges with it. I mean, GDPR's come along since as well, which probably complicates it further. We've all got different risk appetites as insurers. We've all got different delegated authorities. We've all got different SLAs. So any common platform would have to take into account. I mean, that doesn't say it's insurmountable. And of course, we kind of have concern. You know, we are competitors at the end of the day, and you know, that's something we do have to think about as well. And how would that be perceived? I think it would be a really good thing, but whether it's something that could ever actually happen in reality, I think, given what we tried to do even 12 years ago, I'm not so sure that it's going to be practical to actually do it, unfortunately.
Excellent. I know that certainly the disaster recovery market, I know that Jeremy Sykes at Polygon likes looking at a lot of the stats, gets a lot of stuff that he can. It's publicised by the ABI, but it's still quite tough to do. So, Tom, is it a realistic ambition to say, right, there will be people with different platforms, both convenience, for brand strategy, as well as for a little bit of competitive secrets, but there still should be a number of data that different platforms should be able to share in some ways to give some more fundamental industry data?
Yeah, exactly, and I would see it as less of a point about which transactional system you're actually operating the claim on, because there, as you guys have all said, there'll be many different reasons why each kind of supplier or insurer, whoever, will pick a different platform to work on. Is what comes out at the end and what you do with it that's the important bit. So if it's a common understanding of the market that a group were trying to understand, many different ways of pulling those things together, and as long as they're all talking to the same point and roughly bringing things together in the same kind of shape, at that kind of high level, if you're talking about the key things on the customer journey, the timeline, how fast people have gone in or got out, the cost of materials, and so on, they're not terribly difficult things to get hold of, really. So it would be about finding the way to aggregate those together. What will be the right platform or place in which to do that, and how do you deal with those things around privacy and sort of commercial pieces in there, information protection, all of that sort of stuff. But I would have thought there would be a level of it, even if at the simplest level of geographies and general kind of patterns of causes and effect and so on that would potentially be achievable. It's back to the point about culture and collaboration on it, really. You've got to be in it to and have the will and ability to get there, I would say. Less about the technology itself.
Okay, well, we are approaching the end, so let me just go round once more and say, in accepting everything Mike said about comparativeness, etc., starting with Laura, how hopeful are we that you think that we can get efficiently collaborative to be able to assemble some meaningful data without obviously losing competitive edge and information?
I think so. I'm confident we can do that. I mean, I'd certainly urge anyone listening that's working with us, if we're asking you for data and you don't think it's helping with our ambition to ensure we're delivering good cost and covering it, or question, or we're looking at the wrong thing, come and talk to us. We do want to work together to make this stuff better. And if we're asking you for screeds of data that isn't giving us those answers, then we're wasting your time. And I guess it often feels like the drive for data is kind of very much insurer-led, and we're asking for all this information. I guess to kind of flip that on its head a little, what is the static at in your business to make sure that you're delivering good cost and customer outcomes? What do you look at on a daily basis? Let's start. We can start from there, and hopefully build on that, and we can tie that into our end-to-end story. I think
that's great. What about you, Mike? You hopeful that efficient collaboration can take place to produce a better marketplace?
I was just thinking about the question as the others talked, actually, and I suppose it kind of goes back to Laura's point earlier. Is the so what? I mean, what is the expectation of having this data? If it was market data, what were we expecting to do with it? I mean, that's. And I don't know what your view on that, and I know it's you asking the questions, but
my view is simple. I think if we get good enough data, does it help us become more efficient? So it's not, I guess it goes back to an old discussion that I've probably had with a few people about, are we in a marketplace where people want to be the best of the best, or the best of the average, or even the best of the poor? So if the marketplace can get sufficient data that helps it give better customer delivery, keep costs down, that's in everybody's interest as well, and improve outcome, then to a minimum level that helps. And then, if LV or Aviva or anybody else wants to rise above that, of course, then the best amongst the best. So it's to give us the basic information that makes insurance claims easier. I guess that would be the first outcome, Mike.
Yeah, and I suppose, so picking up on that, I think, again, a lot of us use the same suppliers, and, I do think we genuinely go at a place where we're trying to make it as efficient and as simple as possible for people. If suppliers working for, or contractors are working for others, and it's making them inefficient, then, that will affect the service they give to us, second hand, third hand, basically. So I think the main thing for me, and the main point probably about data, is I think and it probably comes from a systems thinking point of view, is really to look at it from the customer's point of view. And if you do that, then I think then you can't go far wrong. The cost control obviously is important, but I do think if we all look at it from a customer's point of view, and again, I go back to that presentation I think I did a couple of years ago, where I just said, look, here's a really simple escape of water claim. And it sounds like, Tom, from what you were saying earlier, that you've done similar work. Here are all the touch points. And you just look at that and you just think, well, that's just crazy, isn't it? Why have you got all those touch points? And quite often it is because of control. It is because of the kind of trying to mitigate risk, and it is because of trying to do the right thing to control costs. But if we looked at things from a customer's point of view, I think we would probably get very different results and actually find that it would help cost control as well.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Just before we go on to Tom, quick correction from Ian Hogarth. He was looking at the systems linking rather than a common platform, which is fine.
Ah, right.
Tom, back to you. But for the final one, just a quick one. Is collaboration realistic? And it's easy to say insurers collaborate among suppliers realistic, because that then would put you in that competitive element, I guess, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it is. Again, it's back to will and the common purpose, and driving the right kind of outcome, the right kind of goal. I think we've sort of touched a couple of times on trust in here, and sort of, you know, delegating authority and decision making in the right kind of way. And if pulling those data sources together helps us to do that bit of prediction that says, kind of, you know what, actually, guys, you told us to deal with this one this way, but we know 100 times out of 101 that's not going to work. We need to do it like this. Actually, there's that bit of trust in there to say, to let us get on with it and do it in that sort of way, and that works for everyone. Again, back to that point of customer first, really. So yeah, I think it definitely can. It's certainly the sort of thing that we'd be up for. So
Great. I think that sounds careful. There would have to be, you know, of course we would have to be careful with it, and I think Mike's right and said that as well. But I think absolutely it's something else we should be looking at if it helps the industry. Laura, Mike and Tom, thanks very much. That was really, really interesting, and something I'm sure we'll return to. Next week we'll be taking a look at contractor networks, funnily enough, and we'll have people, representatives from networks as well as contractors, insurers, hopefully there to help us understand the range and how we can continue to improve the offering. Have gone through some pretty tough times, which we're still going through. Again, I've said it's important that I think it's important that we continue discussing communication, which has helped us so much over the last few months. I will continue to do that. We will continue to force it. And if you've got ideas, again, it's at alan@iloveclaims.com. We'll be letting you know the next couple of weeks how we're going to be quite innovative in ways of keeping all these subjects going during the summer period. Before conferences return, webinars will still be a feature. I just want to thank everybody again. I'll remind you of our up-and-coming events, the Building Conference the 29th of September, the Home Conference on the 11th of November, the Motor Claims Festival next week, which is going to be really entertaining, the first online conference we've ever had that will last 3 days with some really interesting stuff. Well done to the team for putting that on. That's really complicated. An ARC 360, as I mentioned before, simple data perhaps, easier claims, I don't know, you tell me. Nonetheless, really interesting discussions with Mark at 1:30 every single Wednesday on that one. To you all, thanks very much for participating. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the sunshine. Unless you're in Glasgow, apparently, according to Laura, enjoy the sunshine. Please keep to the guidelines. While we're all getting used to lockdown, my own personal message is, remember, COVID-19 is still there. It hasn't gone away as yet. So please enjoy the sunshine and enjoy the new ability we've got to meet with one another. But remember the guidelines. Stay safe with yourselves, your families and your businesses. Hopefully talk to you next week. Thank you very much again. Bye.